Welcome one and welcome all. It is Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, 8:01 p.m. Central Standard Time. We were 60 seconds late. Apologies around here. I say we. It is the weekly Blogging the Boys Roundtable. We are live on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel and the Blogging the Boys Twitch channel. We've been doing a lot more stuff on Twitch as of late. Thinking about streaming myself playing Spider-Man 2 later on this weekend, but that's a conversation for later in the week. You can catch us every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central Time on these platforms. You can also catch the rewatch on these platforms if that is more your cup of tea. You can also listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the Blogging the Boys Podcast Network. Leave a rating, write a review. Those things make us very happy. There are 4 of us here tonight. It is a day after Dallas Cowboys victory edition of the Roundtable. We get generally one of these a year, with the Cowboys having an annual Monday Night Football festivity that occurred on Monday night. The Cowboys victorious in their, westward home, SoFi Stadium, the house that Jerry Jones built, so to speak. 20-17 against the Los Angeles Chargers. We're here to discuss it all. My name is RJ Ochoa, and going in clockwise order, which for the seasoned members of the audience, they know that this is the order of arrival. So Brandon Clements, you were first here. You are the early bird. How does the worm taste?
Fantastic. I think it's the first time I've ever actually done this. Usually it's Tony or last week it was Chris. So I feel honored to be in the pole position today.
That's right. This is a good week to make an F1 reference. What with the United States Grand Prix happening this particular weekend in the Lone Star State. So some early points for you, Brandon. Who's going to win it? Give us a USA Grand Prix prediction.
I would say Lewis Hamilton. I mean, that's an obvious answer.
I didn't think you were going to have an answer ready, so that's some extra bonus points for you, Brandon. You got your thinking cap on today. Well done. David Howman, you earned some extra points with your background of choice. Can you please explain it for the audio listeners only?
Yeah, so if you watch the Cowboys beat the Chargers, you saw that one moment where Kellen Moore on the sideline has his hands over his head and is kind of, I forget which play it was specifically, but looking at something where the play must have gone horribly wrong. And this is just a screenshot of his face with his hands up over his head, which for a lot of Cowboys fans was kind of what they were doing watching his offense sometimes last year. So I felt it was appropriate after the win, after the Kellen Moore offense had their worst game of the season against the Cowboys, ironically, to have this as my background tonight.
That was right before their failed 4th down attempt, which was obviously something that brought us a lot of joy. I'm pretty certain that I took that photo, Howman, because you tweeted at me.
I did pull it from your tweet. You had 4 different ones to choose from, and
yeah.
I had a lot of options, but this one was great.
Well done. Okay, so I'm partially responsible. That gives you even more extra credit, piggybacking off of something I did. Danny Phantom, no extra credit for you tonight. You're coming in just straight up goose egg to start, but we've seen people win roundtables in all shapes, forms, and fashions.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that, RJ.
Well, Danny, actually, I want to start with you before we kind of get into tonight's game that I've developed in the lab all day long. You have had speaking of tweets, some fiery tweets. You are worked up. I've never really seen you this worked up. I've known you for a long time. I've especially never seen you this worked up after a Cowboys win. Is that a fair categorization? Is my read on your overall disposition right now fair and accurate?
I think so. I mean, I can't remember being this disappointed for a win. Yeah, that's correct.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's going to make tonight's roundtable very, very interesting. Tonight, we are going to be playing a game that I did not prep them for, which is kind of my style around here. I think I'm a pretty good planner. I think you all would agree with that. But sometimes I like to keep you on your toes when it comes to a game that is live, which is, the sort of general DNA of the roundtable. We're going to be playing better or worse. I'm going to be, now that the Cowboys are at their bye week, and of course we'll have another roundtable while they're actually on their bye. I'm going to look at a few things, and you're going to tell me whether you feel better or worse about the Cowboys. Some things will be relative to last week when the sky was falling and everything was terrible. Some things will be relative to the season beginning. Some things could be relative to last season at some point in time. Does this make sense to everyone? Danny Phantom, since you are the most morose, we want to make sure we get your seal of approval here.
Sounds great, RJ.
Danny, Howman, are you ready to play this game?
I was born ready. I have total faith in your judgment. So if you come up with it, I'm ready.
Man, Brandon, I don't know how you can top that, but are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm more ready than I guess Phantom is.
By the way, Kevin has awarded you 5 points, Danny. He says, we need the negativity to stop people from overreacting today. We'll see how this goes. But better or worse? Do you feel better or worse, rather, about the Cowboys' decision to move on from Kellen Moore? Last night was an important one from a narrative standpoint with what the Cowboys obviously taking on Kellen Moore's offense. Justin Herbert is highly regarded, had a bit of a tough go. The first possession of the game was, it looked like they were going to run all over Dallas, but then Dan Quinn put the clamps on. Good for him. I've been trashing Dan Quinn a little bit around here, so I'll eat that crow. Howman, you are the most visually prepared, I guess, for this particular question. So after Monday night, do you feel better or worse about Dallas's decision to move on from Kellen?
I think, honestly, my position hasn't really changed one way or the other after that game, but I already felt better about it from the moment that it happened. So I guess I'll say better just because I still feel like this was a move that needed to happen for both sides. Kellen Moore, to his credit, he's, aside from Monday night, he's done a great job with the Chargers. The offense has been, really firing on all cylinders. And that's why it was so impressive what the Dallas defense did against this Chargers team. It was the first time they were held to less than 20 points. So, you could go through and list all these different things that they weren't able to do that they've done against other defenses so far this year. And then, with the changes that Mike McCarthy has brought in, obviously it's still not completely where it needs to be. And there's been some issues. Red zone has been a struggle at times. The complete goose egg that they laid against the 49ers was obviously terrible. There were some issues with the run game against the Chargers defense on Monday night that obviously need to get fixed. But overall, some of the things that the West Coast principles that have been introduced, I like. I'm still waiting for it to really coalesce all together and become one finished product, but we're also 6 weeks in. I'm not expecting absolute perfection 6 weeks into tweaking this offense and also incorporating new elements into it, like Brandon Cooks, like Jake Ferguson stepping up into the tight end one role. So, I'm not ready to do a full victory lap and say Mike McCarthy totally won this breakup or anything. But I never really thought it was that situation to begin with. This was just there needed to be a change of scenery for both. Mike McCarthy needed to put his stamp on the offense. Kellen Moore needed to go somewhere where he could have full autonomy over the offense. And I think that both of them for the long haul, they're just better off for having parted ways.
So first of all, great answer. But second of all, I've been told by Tony Catalina, who's in the audience, that my audio was off early on. Does my audio sound better? I think I did not have my studio microphone. It should sound.
It sounds fine.
It sounds fine.
Sound good to me.
So it sounds the exact same that it sounded before, is what you're saying. Nothing is different.
Yeah.
So Tony Catalina is a liar, just so we're all on the record, because he slacked me and said that it sounded like my audio is coming in through my computer's microphone, not the studio microphone that I have set up here. So Tony, you lose points, even though you're not here on the roundtable. Danny Phantom, I see you chomping at the bit on this particular question. By the way, Tony says y'all are lying in the chat, just so we're all clear about this. So, hey, we'll see what it is. But Danny, do you feel better or worse about the Cowboys' decision to move on from Kellen?
I'm the same with Howman. My feeling hasn't changed as far as what I think. However, I disagree with him with pretty much everything else that he said. Honestly,
Thanks,
I think if you try to look at this one game, you can kind of make some cases about, Kellen wasn't that impressive and everything, but you shouldn't do that. You should look at things for everything that you've seen. And I think Cowboy fans have seen enough to where, they're always when we don't get the results we want, we are always looking for some scapegoat. And it's been Garrett, it's been, defense, it's been Kellen Moore last year. But I think that, to me, this isn't even something that is a hard question. I am so disappointed with the state of this Cowboys offense. And it's not just one thing, it's just so many things. So for me, I think McCarthy is just dreadful as an offensive coordinator. I think, and you guys know this already, I thought he was kind of not very good toward the later part of his Green Bay days as well. So I'm not overly surprised by this, but how it's affected the Cowboys defense. They can't run the ball. He's turned Dak he's just taken all the goodness from Dak. I mean, everything we saw last night, and I'm sure we're going to get to that, was nothing that was created from Mike McCarthy and the play calling. So no, I think the Cowboys made a huge mistake, and McCarthy, to me, and Kellen Moore, they're just completely different. One tries to score points and the other just hopes that we come out with the win.
So just to be clear, Danny, and I had my dog was getting my slipper, so I had to attend to her. But so apologies. This is a rough night for me, apparently. You're not necessarily upset about the decision to move on from Kellen. You're more upset about the replacement option the Cowboys went with. What with it being?
No, I'm both. I'm upset to move on from Kellen, and then to replace him with McCarthy it just compounds it. So no.
Wow. Okay. Double hit for Danny Phantom. T's and P's, my friend. Brandon, I think we're going to have a clean sweep here. So I'm going to set you up with a new question, which is sort of related to this, obviously. So do you feel better or worse regarding our collective thoughts on the Texas coast? I hate saying this out loud, by the way. I feel so cartoony saying Texas coast, but whatever. But after the first 2 weeks of the season, Brandon, we were kind of, he and Han, we were like, oh man, all Kellen wanted to do was score points. Like Danny said, Mike McCarthy, he gets it. He's taken this low hanging fruit. Everybody needs to chill out and give Mike McCarthy his props. What he said at the combine about wanting to run the ball, y'all weren't listening properly. So I would say that was the peak of confidence in Mike McCarthy's offense so far on this young season. It has only cratered since then. I think it's the collective opinion, but better or worse, your thoughts, Brandon?
I actually like it. I'm on the better side of things for this offense. I get Danny's point with the whole Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy does make some boneheaded decisions sometimes, like that I don't know what it was. Like I called it magical on X last night. I'm like, oh, so we went from 8 seconds to 3 seconds at the end of the half. There, we couldn't throw at least one ball in the end zone and go get some points. So like,
let's pause here, Brandon, because this is an important thing that happened. So excuse me for that, but the decision, because we haven't had like a group. I know you guys had the writer's block that came out obviously on Tuesday morning, but we're here now with a live audience, so it's worth discussing. What were your thoughts on the decision to fold with 8 seconds left, 2 timeouts in the Cowboys pocket from the LA 14-yard line in the first half on Monday night?
I absolutely hated it. I was ticked off. Like to me, like that's Mike McCarthy in a nutshell. Like he's very conservative, and that's the part of me that really doesn't, like I like the style of offense. I've always been a fan of the West Coast offense. I grew up watching it. So like I really do like the principles. I do like that they run the ball. So but Mike McCarthy, like there was no stones. He didn't have any stones at the end of that. Like I was so confused until Joe Buck came on the air, after the halftime break, and he explained like the clock operator kind of just assumed, all right, yeah, they're probably just going to take a timeout here, and even the clock operator was like, oh, I kind of surprised they didn't go for it here. Like for me, like with 8 seconds, like it's not that complicated. You're inside the red zone. You just tell Dak, if something looks good, take the shot. If it doesn't look good, throw it at someone's feet or throw it in the dirt and call it a day. And then bring Aubrey in. Like to me, to not take at least one shot at the end zone, to me was just I don't like that. I think it's way too conservative. I mean, I get we still got the points, but regardless, if Dak would have just seen it and seen a guy open, could have had a touchdown. If he didn't like what the play was, just throw it in the dirt and call it a day. He'd still get the points. Just not having the opportunity to do that really ticked me off. And I'm glad the Cowboys obviously won the game. But at that point, I was steaming at halftime because I'm like, oh, great, this might be one of the reasons why the Cowboys lose the game. Thankfully, I was wrong, but overall, I was not pleased.
Howman, I'm looking forward to your analytics roundup later this week. Howman writes this every week at blogontheboys.com. The Cowboys offensively after week 6 rank 18th in offensive DVOA specifically. Now, they do rank 10th in offensive EPA per play. So you could kind of pick what you want here to create the narrative that you want. But from a DVOA standpoint, offensively, Howman, they're behind the Denver Broncos. I don't mean to bring up Sean Payton incidentally, but Howman, you and I have been, I think, the most pro Mike McCarthy or the least aggressive towards jumping all over him. Although, Brandon, you are kind of our bright shining sun that shines upon everything. But that being said, Howman, I feel like we've been really patient with Mike McCarthy. I don't want to overreact, but I'm almost out off of the end of the first half specifically. Like that was enough to really kind of throw me off this ride that I want nothing to be a part of. That was such a cowardly move. I don't care about his explanation about wanting points because it was the end of the first half, whatever. You do not show up to these games to punt in that sense. But your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the decision to not take the timeout there, I did not like it. I'm right there with Brandon as far as like, I mean, 8 seconds, that's enough time for you to go and take a shot. And, you very clearly tell Dak, like, hey, you get one shot, you throw it to the end zone. If you don't have it, like, throw the ball away, make sure you don't take more than 8 seconds. Hearing Mike McCarthy explain his thought process, like, I get it. I understand his thought process. He had said that going into that drive, they're like cut off with 7 seconds of like, if it's 7 seconds, like we're just going to go for the field goal there instead. 8 seconds, obviously it is more than 7 seconds, but like just barely. I'm not too good at math, but I know that much. So I understand, especially with one, how much Dak Prescott was under pressure all night, because it was a really bad performance from his offensive line. And also with some of the penalties that they had throughout the game, but also just on that drive. I get being a little bit scared at that point about going out there and maybe some crazy fluky play happens and then you don't even have a chance for a field goal. So I understand it, but also, yeah, it was conservative. I don't like playing conservative there. As far as the offense goes, though, I mean, it really is tough just because there hasn't really been a whole lot of like meaningful football that the Cowboys have played. They've either been winning in a blowout or losing in a blowout. And this was the first game where you actually got to see the offense operate like they would in a more or less neutral game situation. And, to the point about like, the comments Mike McCarthy made about like running the ball back at the combine. I mean, right now the Cowboys for the season they have the 11th highest early down pass rate. Against the Chargers, they ranked in just week 6. They were 10th in early down pass rate. So like, I know we got on them a lot for some of those second and long runs that they called, and those were bad calls. And most of the time they didn't work out. But as far as like the actual numbers of how much they were throwing it on early downs relative to just trying to, run the ball right into a brick wall on first and second down and burning the play, which was a problem under Kellen Moore. It hasn't really happened a whole lot with the Cowboys this season when they've been in those normal game situations. So that's one thing that does still give me some optimism. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, it's 6 weeks. Not a whole lot of those games have actually been like super valuable data to pull conclusions out of. So I really don't have much to say like definitively one way or the other. But I am still hopeful.
Danny, this was the subject that I saw most of your tweets about, was the end of the first half, whatever you want to call it, from Mike McCarthy. So to hit some of the comments we have, Danny, Kevin says, I was fine with that. It shows you Mike doesn't trust Dak, and for good reason. Kevin then offered giving Dak screw up in the playoffs with 9 seconds left in the playoffs 2 years ago. Can you really blame Mike for not trusting Dak in that situation? Lord says, not the artist, Rulers is a great song. We won by 3. That was the 3. I'm fine with it, but it makes me question if he doesn't trust Dak. David Smith says, doesn't trust Dak to execute. Ninja Nuts says, well, if he doesn't trust Dak, then his trust is misplaced because 4 won that game. Last one before your thoughts, Danny. Kevin says, Mike is getting roasted for that. Imagine how bad it would be if they lost. That's a losing attitude and a losing decision. Absolutely not beating top tier teams with that mindset and play calling. Danny Phantom.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it was upsetting. I've seen McCarthy take this conservative approach before, several times, in fact, and it hasn't had the type of effect where it's like really stood out to where they come back after halftime and they still, we have an explanation for what happened at the end. I mean, I've never seen it to that degree before, but I've seen the Eagles drive down on 2 plays in 17 seconds to get a touchdown because they were pushing it. They were trying, and then if he doesn't trust Dak, then we got some big problems. But here's the thing. If he really was that concerned about that being risky and he wanted the points, then why did he go for it on 4th and short and do
right?
I mean, so take the points there, because I'll tell you what's a higher percentage play is your free play that you have right before you kick a field goal. I mean, that's much safer than converting on 4th down there. And he didn't. He chose. And to me, I don't care that they didn't make it. Good call. They made the right call. the Cowboys got beat in the line of scrimmage, but good call. But then to turn around, you have 8 seconds and not to take a shot. I don't even have words for it. It's the kind of cowardness that this is what losing teams do. This is what will get you bounced from the playoffs. This is what gets you bounced from even making the playoffs. It's no way to coach a team. You have a quarterback that can make plays, and he did that last night. And you're not going to at least give him a chance, I mean, it's almost like he's playing with an emergency quarterback or a backup that doesn't know the playbook or something, to where he doesn't want to take any chances at all. But he didn't. He has Dak, and there's just no excuse for that. It's been a long time. I honestly, I can't even remember when I've seen a worse coaching call.
The answer, I always thought this was overblown, but the answer is Jason Garrett icing Dan Bailey.
No, it's not, RJ, because icing the kicker is not even a real thing.
That's the worst one.
That is what people say. That's what people say.
No, but like if you're backtracking to like boneheaded coaching decisions, that's the most recent one. That's what I'm not saying that's worse than this. I'm just saying that's the answer to your question.
That's the answer, but it's the wrong answer because it's a fallacy, and that's not even a right answer. This is an actual coaching mistake. So, and you seriously, you have to go back. If you want to say icing the kicker, fine. You're not paying attention to football, but you just cannot find coaching mistakes. You have to go back to Switzer probably, or I don't even know, Campo. It's really bad because and the thing is McCarthy does little things like this. And, we complained about him last year too, when he's doing things and we were winning, and he just keeps doing it. And it's going to come back to bite us. And I don't understand the mindset behind doing something like that.
Howman, you very politely raised your hand.
Yeah. Well, I think, first, I'll reiterate that I also did not like the move to not take a shot. That said, I think this is something that's ultimately being blown out of proportion just because it happened at the end of the half. It was on a nationally televised game. But there's something to be said for a coach having their process. And that's what this really boiled down to. Like I said, McCarthy said that they're going into that drive, their cutoff was 7 seconds. They had like a process that they established of, if we get to this point and this is where we're in, like that's the decision-making process for us. And
they made a decision when they were not emotionally compromised ahead of time. That's a fair
right. It's not like he got to the play and then just made the decision on the fly. Similar to how they handle a lot of the fourth down calls, where they'll say if we get it's fourth down within 3 yards or whatever it might be, then we already know that we're going to be going for it on fourth down, or we already know that we're going to send out the punt team because they have that process in place. So I mean, you can go ahead and then question the decision making that leads to that process, but I also think it's much more important to focus on preserving the process than necessarily just questioning the results, because everybody does that. And just with the Chargers head coach, like everybody, he goes for it on fourth down all the time, and everyone makes fun of him when he doesn't get it, and then when he does get it, and then they say, oh, he's a genius. But the process for him is ultimately still the same, how he makes those decisions. And I think it ultimately in the long run is a good thing that your coach has a clearly defined decision-making process and sticks to it, rather than just kind of, shooting from the hip and doing what he feels like. And by the way, if we're really looking for like one of the more boneheaded coaching decisions, more recent than the icing Dan Bailey, I think, is telling Tavon Austin to take a fair catch no matter
against
what.
Minnesota. I was thinking about this while you were speaking. Howman. That's a great. That was the Vikings game 4 years ago. Great call. That was on
right.
Sunday Night Football.
That was one that like still blows my mind to this point. So, and also just the reality is every single coach has clock management issues every single week, and it's usually the ones on the primetime games that we all talk about. But this is something that just, you have decisions where someone's going to question you. There's going to be room for debate. I think it's not what I would have done, but I think in the long run, like.
Is Howman freezing, or is this my connection? I've had internet issues all day.
Yeah,
so
it's Howman.
Okay, it's Howman. That was really dramatic. Obviously,
I have froze Howman.
Oh yeah, I have frozen Howman too, and frozen Kellen for what it's worth.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. So I would also offer in that same Vikings game, on the possession that the Cowboys did not get points, Dak was dealing. And I remember tweeting about this. He was like 6 of 7 for like 76 yards at that point in time. And then the Cowboys, I might be butchering the details, but like ran Zeke on 2nd and 3rd and goal, and it just like completely neutered that drive, and it was a really, really tough scene for them. That was Kirk Cousins' first ever win on primetime that Dallas helped make happen. Brandon, let's get to a question from the crowd. Kevin says, I would love to ask the panel, you are the panel, do we put the penalties, because we're talking about Mike McCarthy here, specifically pre-snap penalties on the coaching? In my mind, it has to go on Mike McCarthy and staff. Brandon.
Yeah, I think it does too. I think you got to coach your players up. I think Kevin makes a great point there. Mike McCarthy is known for this. Like look at like the J. Ron Curse situation last week. Like he was lined up like he was a tight end on the offense. Like the players have to be accountable as well. But the coaches, like Bill Belichick, literally he keeps his guys accountable. And this is a different scenario. But like if a guy fumbles the ball, it doesn't matter if you're the best player on the team. You sit. Like he makes his players more accountable. I just think sometimes Mike McCarthy kind of gets in his own way with these things. So I agree with Kevin on that. I think it's on Mike McCarthy and the staff. It's one of those things that's very frustrating because I feel like we're one of the most penalized teams, year in and year out when we shouldn't be. And I think these things need to be cleaned up. And it's a year after year situation, but we're still here. We're still talking about it. So obviously it's not being corrected. So to me, that is on the coaching staff, and that needs to be corrected. Or again, I'll say it again. The ceiling for the playoffs, at this stage is still a divisional round because of things like this. Because if you're not going to have these mental errors like in the rear view, then you're just not going to progress any further in the playoffs. These penalties are going to bite you in the rear end when it matters most, and these things happen in the playoffs. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. It's awful management by Mike McCarthy and his staff.
Danny, we've seen penalties be an issue for the Cowboys in the Mike McCarthy era. We've seen blaming external factors. Remember that 2021 season, they blamed officials a lot. They obviously went out in really poor fashion after the wild card loss to San Francisco. There has been a tendency to kind of shuck responsibility, even for things like penalties, particularly pre-snap ones.
Yeah, well, first off, I want to defend Mike McCarthy here because I think that it's important to just to be objective and be fair, and I can go on a long laundry list of things that McCarthy did wrong last night. But I want to say, when you are having players line up offsides and you're having 12 men on the field and you're having these undisciplined plays that's costing you, that's resetting the downs on defense. That's on Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn needs to clean those things up. And I mean, Dan Quinn's a great coach, and his body of work, it trumps, what we've seen from McCarthy recently. So, I mean, there's no debate about who's more at blame or something, but definitely when you look at the things going on defense, those are things on McCarthy. When you look at the offense not knowing what they're doing, and they have to call a timeout. One thing about that halftime play we're not talking about is that the Cowboys, McCarthy had to call timeout to save a delay a game. Those guys aren't situated, and he doesn't have his act together. And that timeout would have been great, at the end of the first half, because then we wouldn't have had this whole dilemma about McCarthy screwing up the clock management thing. But so the things that are Mike McCarthy's fault are Mike McCarthy's fault, and the things that are Quinn are Quinn. And so, I mean, I think that you have to make sure that the blame goes into the correct person. However, when it's penalties, repeatedly penalties, and when you have the constant things that goes, and the clock management and the dreadful play calling, and McCarthy himself doesn't even seem like he's aware of his own team's limitations, because he just seems like he's in his own sense of like we're going to be fine. I mean, this is what will cause you to lose games. And I think when you look at everything together, and I posted it, I tweeted it, you just see it's bad. There's a lot of things. It's really bad. And I think all those things collectively, that just points to clearly you have a bad head coach, and that's going to be a problem until the Cowboys fix that.
Howman, final point on Mike McCarthy is yours here from Ninja Net. Says he was supposed to bring this knowledge of what a Super Bowl mentality is, and so far we haven't seen it. I would say that to say we haven't seen it would be unfair, but it hasn't been sterling, and there have definitely been some disconnects where we wouldn't like them to be.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like he hasn't come in and magically won the Super Bowl in his first year, even the first few years. That being said, he did do something no Cowboys coach has done, which is back-to-back 12-win seasons, which is back-to-back playoff appearances by the same coach since the Barry Switzer days, the glory days of the 90s. So, I mean, he has done a lot of good. To say that he's a bad coach is just laughable, quite honestly. I mean, this is a guy who's won a Super Bowl, which, by the way, like Dan Quinn, great coach. He didn't win a Super Bowl as a head coach. He got there and he lost. Mike McCarthy actually got there and he won. And I mean, there's just the resume. Like he has done this and he's done it at a high level. And I mean, we can talk about whether or not he has lived up to his expectations in Dallas so far. I think to this point, probably I would say he's like teetering right around like has met expectations, not exceeded, because he's turned them into a consistent winner. And he's gotten them to the playoffs 2 straight years. And even did really well last year when he didn't have Dak Prescott. But obviously, the whole thing that he was brought in for was to get them a Super Bowl. And if he goes his entire tenure and does not get them a Super Bowl, ultimately, it will be a failure. Of course, it's hard to really make that determination in the middle of his coaching tenure. As far as the penalties go, I mean, that's something that, like Danny was saying, if it's offensive penalties, it really falls on the guy who's in charge of the offense in my mind, which is McCarthy. If it's defensive penalties, it falls on the guy who's in charge of the defense. At the same time, these are professionals making millions of dollars. They've been playing the game for a while. It's not rookies that are making these mistakes. They got to take responsibility and accountability. And as for the 12 men on the field too, like keep in mind that the Chargers were going into this game, they were second in the league in fastest pace per play between each play. Like they get up to the line of scrimmage, they get the play call in, and they run it very fast, regardless of what kind of game situation they're in, whether they're leading, they're trailing, whatever. They move really fast. And for a defense like Dallas who subs a lot, that's going to get you in trouble with some of those 12 men on the field calls. And it happened with Dallas. So with those particular penalties, I'm not like necessarily worried. That's not been a recurring, that specific penalty has not been recurring for them. I think that's just a case of Kellen Moore runs his offense fast. He knew he was going to get a chance for some of those penalties to be called, and it happened.
Okay, this concludes the Mike McCarthy portion of the discussion. The Cowboys did win yesterday, just so we're all clear. But sometimes you have to have difficult conversations. This next one is a difficult one. We can have this respectfully, because I think I know where you're all going to answer. I think you're all going to say worse. But there's been a lot of there've been negative tweets about this. It's fine to have this discussion, but we can be polite about it. Brandon, do you feel better or worse about the Cowboys wide receiver trio of CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup?
I feel worse. Yeah, I think that's the obvious answer. We were talking about on the writer's block that aired earlier today on the podcast network, and it was Michael Gallup had 3 grabs on 10 targets, so a 30% rate of return, I guess. On passes to him is awful, and of those 7 incompletions, I think there was only 2 other incompletions Dak threw the rest of the night to everybody else he threw to. So the majority of his incompletions were to Michael Gallup. Unfortunately, like I've given Michael Gallup a long leash. Obviously for the ACL injury. Obviously the contract that he has. Like I know there's an out coming up here that it's like $13 million in 2024. That's something to think about. But I feel like it is time, it's for Michael Gallup to maybe slide down the totem pole, maybe to receiver 4. I'm not saying let's get him off the roster yet or anything like that. But I kind of want to see. I do want to see more Turp. I know Turp's a smaller guy, but I think Cavante Turpin would be somebody I'd like to see a little bit more of. And obviously Jalen Tolbert, where I think he had about 70% of the snaps when Brandon Cooks was out earlier in the year. So I'd like to see a little bit more Tolbert, which is kind of crazy for me to say because I wasn't the biggest Tolbert believer for a long time. So I had to eat a little crow on that. So I'm going to own that one. But and I was looking at the numbers. For Tolbert, it's a smaller sample size. But out of the 9 targets he's had this year, 7 of them were completed. So he's almost at 80%. I know it's a smaller sample size, but Tolbert played a lot better. But the drawback is I don't know from he's been the special teams ace since CJ Goodwin's been out. So it's like you kind of weigh that a little bit. Turpin's a special teams guy, so there's a lot of factors involved. But Michael Gallup had 2 drops, one that ended the drive, and then one that was Dak threw a dime. Like Dak threw it right in. He threw it right at. It was in between the three defenders, right in the end zone, and he just dropped it. So it's. I think there's a confidence thing going on. I hate to say that, but I feel like it's. I don't know if he trusts his knee 100% Gallup. I just don't. And right now, I feel like he's in his head about it. I'd like to see him. Maybe they cut his workload a little bit and maybe send a message and maybe we get a little more Turpin and Earth Holbert.
David asked in the comment section what Michael Gallup's completion rate is. He's been targeted 32 times so far this season, second most on the team, has 18 receptions. So not exactly glowing. Howman, I'm sorry, Brandon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was 56% completion percentage to Gallup. So it's not pretty.
Danny, this is really a question about Michael Gallup. I think everybody feels great about CD, obviously, and it was very cool to see CD kind of call for the ball and then deliver on that on Monday night. It was certainly the best game that Brandon Cooks has had as a member of the Cowboys. You have a touchdown, you have a really important third down conversion that's going to do that kind of stuff. So again, this is really about Michael Gallup. I just didn't want to say it that way. Your thoughts?
I don't think it is. I think you got to include Brandon Cooks in here too, because he scored a touchdown, but who could even say they're remotely close to being satisfied to what their expectations was for Brandon Cooks? He's just been completely, invisible to this offense so far. We were excited about this group, and this is a talented group. I know Michael Gallup has had a rough go, and it's clear that he hasn't been playing to his capability, but I'm not ready to give up on him. I do think that the offense has just created some issues overall for everybody. Obviously CeeDee Lamb, nobody's going to doubt how good he is. He's frustrated with things. And I think you just got to give these guys opportunities. And Brandon Cooks, I thought I like the jet sweep that they did. I think finding ways to get him involved is good. And I think the Cowboys just haven't been able to do that yet. I'm hopeful that, like what Howman said, is like, and I felt this a few weeks ago when we were still winning, but the offense still was kind of looking sus. And it's it's weird me saying that. I'm sorry. I have kids around me. But
that was awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
But I'm hoping that it's going to get better. McCarthy has to have some of his good plays, still. And work through some of these things. And I'm hoping the bye week provides opportunity to do that, because I know he's a better play caller than what he's showing us so far. But I will say that, honestly, I think it's too hard to be critical of these guys, because if that's the case, let's be critical of Tony Pollard and everybody that plays offense, because there's just a lot of problems going on, and I think it's just maybe a little unfair to just be too overly critical of these guys.
We have a few more to get to, so Howman, I don't mean to say hurry up, but make it a little bit quicker pace here, because we have 3 left.
Yeah, like you said, CeeDee Lamb has been, he's been great, aside from some comments he made after the 49ers game that he obviously very quickly atoned for with his performance against the Chargers. Brandon Cooks, to Danny's point, like the first 5 weeks, I totally agree. He had a really great game week 6. It could just be a case of like him and Dak are, their chemistry is really starting to click now. He's getting a little more comfortable with his quarterback, his new offense, hoping that's the case, and he comes out and he's has more games like that. Michael Gallup is tricky because he had 2 really good performances. I tweeted this out after the 49ers game. In weeks 3 and 4, Dak Prescott averaged a 113.2 passer rating when he was targeting Gallup, which very, very good. Gallup was great in those 2 games. Since then, he has not been nearly as good. Against the Chargers, he's struggled especially. I did think his defenders kind of got away with a little bit too much physicality on some of those plays, but at the same time, Gallup is he's been that kind of contested catch guy. He should be making a lot of those catches. So I don't know if I'm ready to necessarily say bench him and get Tolbert in there, because he has shown this year that he still has some juice. But definitely after these last 2 games, I do feel slightly worse about the receiving core than I did certainly a few weeks ago, and definitely coming into the season.
Okay. I think that these were all fair answers, Danny. I think it's fair to include Brandon Cooks, depending on what your answering this relative to, because at training camp, we thought like Brandon Cooks was going to be amazing. I mean, Brandon Cooks has had 1,000 yards everywhere, right? Like it was inevitable that Brandon Cooks was going to get 1,000 yards. And it doesn't seem like, I don't know exactly what he's on pace for, but I would guess it is shy of 1,000 yards at this point in time. So we'll see. So I do think that that's a fair inclusion on your part. We have two kind of general ones that we'll save for the end. Kevin demanded this one. We're going to get to right now. But before we do, an update on the score. Brandon, you got to pick up the pace. 35 points. Howman, 43. Danny, you actually picked up 8 total points for your sus usage. So keep that in mind. You do lead the way with 45 at this point in time. I almost hope you win and have that to thank for it. But we'll see. It's a long game still. So better or worse, the ability of the Cowboys run game. I almost titled this, Howman, better or worse, the Cowboys' decision to franchise tag Tony Pollard. But I think we knew the Cowboys were they had no choice really, given the lack of explosive playmakers on the roster at the time. But still, the run game has been really disappointing, especially for somebody in Mike McCarthy who, however much you believe him or not, wanted to make this a focus. Some of that's on him. Some of that's on Tony Pollard. Some of that's on the offensive line. I mean, they played 6 games, and for only a third of them have they had their intended starters. So it's a bit of a bummer in an overall sense.
Yeah, I definitely feel worse about the run game, especially with Brian Schottenheimer being the offensive coordinator. He's coordinated some really great run games specifically. I know he gets a lot of flack because he is a very run-heavy coordinator generally throughout his tenure, but he does do a really great job of designing his run plays and bringing over Mike Solari, who was his offensive line coach when he was in Seattle as well. I had really high hopes for the run game because they're so much more creative with how they coordinate their run schemes in previous coaching tenures. And I thought with the offensive line, with Tony Pollard adding in Deuce Vaughn, who he was a healthy scratch, and unfortunately he earned that healthy scratch with some of his play recently. It seems like everything related to the run game, except for when Dak Prescott is keeping the ball and running for a touchdown, has just really not at all gone according to plan. I'm not really entirely sure what the fix is. I think going into this bye, that's the number one thing that this offense really needs to work on fixing and figure out what the solution is to solving that run game. Because if it's going to be like that Chargers game every week where Dak's got to go out and be under duress and be making plays and has to have those miraculous throws where he's across his body to Tony Pollard or Brandon Cooks has to go up and make that big catch on third down. Like if you're doing that every single week and you can't have a reliable run game to some degree, you're not going to be able to have much success long run. So that's, to me, the biggest thing with this offense that they need to fix right now.
Brandon.
Yeah, the run game has been a problem all year. It's every stat that I look at, you can see the Cowboys are obviously committed to the run. Howman made the point about Schottenheimer. Mike McCarthy wants to. He said it at the combine this past year. So like they're sticking to their guns on that, but the results aren't there. Like they're top 12 in majority of the statistics at, besides average. Their average yards per carry is under 4, which is not really good. It's towards the bottom of the league right now. So to me, I feel like, and I might get some heat for this, and that's fine. I'll take it. Tony Pollard, to me, you're paying him over $10 million this year for a guy who I don't think is a lead running back in the NFL. I think he's more of he's a situational running back. I think he's a change of pace guy. I just don't think, he can get it done from time to time, but he's not, not everybody's a Derrick Henry where he's going to, be able to run, hammer, in the fourth quarter or a Zeke in his prime, in the fourth quarter. I think we're missing that. And I know Zeke, was what he was, last year. And obviously you're seeing it this year with the Patriots. But I think I'd like, for what we have on the roster right now, I'd like to see more Rico Dowdle. I think he's the guy, or a Hunter Lepke. I want to see some more, I want to see some guys that, are more of a downhill. They're going to lay their shoulder into you. Pollard's just trying to make some moves and get downfield pretty quick. So for me, he's a finesse back. And I mean, he was a receiver in college as well. So he's got that ability, obviously. But for me, I think, long term, I think the Cowboys may want to look in the draft this coming year for a running back that, has some weight to him. Like there's a guy that beat up on my Syracuse Orange this past weekend, Trey Benson. He's a very solid running back. A guy like that would be a day 2, day 3 pick. I'm not saying, use a heavy capital on a running back, but I'm saying like a, late day 2, early day 3 going forward, because I think the loss of a power back, is I think it's hurting the running game, because I do think that's what's holding this offense back is Tony Pollard just isn't that guy like Zeke was a couple years ago, or what Derrick Henry has been for many years. I think we need a guy who's a hammer. I like Tony Pollard obviously, but we need a hammer in there.
Danny, two parts of this. One, did you know that Brandon is a Syracuse fan? And two, do you agree that the Cowboys miss Zeke Elliott?
I did, and they do not miss Zeke Elliott. No, I will say this. So many words I have. Now the Cowboys were smart to tag him in the sense of now they're not committed. And honestly, I was surprised when Asante Samuel Jr. cut Tony Pollard, because I thought he was gone. And I mean, this is the thing is I love Tony Pollard too, but running backs, they just take, it takes a toll, and you do lose the juice. And I'm sorry, Zeke lost the juice, and it's just something that happens. And with Tony Pollard, I want to say this though. Of all the things that I complain about with McCarthy, I don't necessarily believe that the running game is one of those things as far as how he is going about scheming it. I did tweet earlier that I mentioned like the Cowboys yards per play right now is worse than it's been since like 2005. And that's just how bad through all the, Garrett coordinators and Kellen and everybody, it's worse than all that. So you have to go back to actually Sean Payton, who's the Broncos guy, when he was the passing game coordinator. That's how bad it's been. But also at that same year is the last time that the Cowboys were running the ball as ineffective as they are right now. It's you have to go back that far. But I will say this, to McCarthy's credit, it's not necessarily with what he has dialed up. It's the fact that his guys are getting pushed around. I mean, the linemen are getting pushed back, and they're not only just getting pushed back, but they're allowing them to disengage and then just having free shots on our ball carriers. I just think that the Cowboys are just getting out physicaled, to be quite honest. But I will say this part is McCarthy's fault. His lack of to take deep field shots and having these defenders come up there. And if you look at the Chargers last week, I mean, you'd had so many guys. It's tough to get all these hats on hats because there's just too many of them, and nobody's scared of the Cowboys taking these shots. And I think that's the part that needs to be corrected. If you ask, like, I don't know how to fix it, well, make them respect your passing game, and then that's how you'll fix it. Because I do think that collectively everything that the Cowboys are doing has just been really ineffective. But the way to do that is to change their way and start to have more of a kind of a Kellen Moore type of offense.
I don't want to pick on him specifically, but Terrence Steele has been, I think, one of the worst players on the Cowboys for the first 6 games of the season. And that's just kind of representative of where the problems are right now, is these dudes and these cornerstones that you thought you could count on aren't living up to it right now. But hopefully the bye week kind of comes and settles everybody down. Okay, Kevin, that was your topic. Congratulations. We have 2 more left. They're effectively the same thing, but they're different. Here's a look at the score right now. Brandon, you have 52 points. Howman, 48. Danny, 55. Again, that sus has got you in the lead. So make sure you do everything you can to hold on to it. So this is better or worse, both of them relative to last week, really, and how we felt around roundtable time a week ago, however you want to look at that. Howman, you're up first. Better or worse, the idea that the Cowboys are an NFC contender? Because I think a week ago, maybe we said, yeah, they are kind of by proxy, but they can't beat the 49ers, so what does it really matter? But, winning helps a lot with a lot of things. And while Monday night was frustrating, the Cowboys did win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my opinion on this has changed from last week, just because, the Cowboys, they beat the Chargers, but they didn't necessarily look dominant doing it. And, I'm not necessarily saying that it was a bad win. I don't think there is such a thing as a bad win. And I'm certainly not one to complain about winning. But I mean, the Chargers are, to their credit, they are a good team. Their losses have come to teams that aren't too shabby. Justin Herbert's playing good. Their biggest problem was that the defense has been really iffy in a lot of big spots. And to their credit, they played I think probably statistically their best game of the year against the Cowboys. And I mean, the Chargers are a good team. Like, beating them is a good thing, but at the same time, after the way that they lost to the 49ers, I don't think there was really a whole lot short of a complete and total blowout of the Chargers that would have really made me feel better. And I'm not going to feel worse after they get a win. just because I don't think after that 49ers loss I could have felt worse about their status as a legitimate NFC contender. I still feel this is a team that's, talented enough. They're going to win games. They might even win their division, especially with the Eagles losing this past week. That helps. They have a really tough schedule coming up. And, they're going to make the playoffs most likely. Do I think they can get out of the NFC, get to the Super Bowl? My mind last week I said no, and it still hasn't changed.
Brandon, I'm going to reshape this question for you. Prior to the season starting, everyone kind of collectively agreed that the top 3 teams in the NFC were the Niners, the Eagles, and Cowboys, in whatever order people had them. Do you think the Cowboys are still one of the 3 best teams in the conference, or have the Lions surpassed them?
I think at this stage of the game, I do think the Detroit Lions have surpassed them. I think the Detroit Lions are playing some really good ball. Dan Campbell, he's former Cowboys tight end. He's one of those guys, and I know Howman's a big Lions guy. I know he was talking about them a lot this past year. So
Howman was the only one. Nobody spoke about the Lions last year. Nobody, not ad nauseum at all. Right.
No. So credit to Howman on that. I will pass that along.
I love you, Howman. That wasn't a Howman shot. I was just really annoyed by the collective world. So.
But I mean, the Cowboys to me are 4th. So like if I had they slide down past the Lions, because right now I think it's the Niners, the Eagles, the Lions, and then the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, to answer the original question, they still are. They're better. They're still a contender. I'm not concerned about that. They're a playoff team. I still think they're going to win 10 or 11 games this year easily. But right now, I just think I do think they're just a tier below the top 3 right now. And I'm as somebody who's been following the league my entire life. The Detroit Lions. Imagine if they won a Super Bowl. That'd be crazy. I just but they're playing some good ball. They have some guys that what's his name there? Goff. I mean, he's been playing well. I mean,
that's not where I thought you were going.
No, Goff is a guy who was he was a 1st round pick from the Rams, and he was essentially like a throw-in for that LA Rams trade where they gave the Detroit Lions got all these picks and they got Goff. The Rams, they got Stafford. Right now, I mean, the Lions did pretty on that trade. Goff is playing some good football. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a good player. Jahmyr Gibbs is good. They got some weapons there, and obviously Aiden Hutchinson's one of the best pass rushers in the league. And I think they're putting it all together. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars might have regretted not taking Aiden Hutchinson first because he's one of the best guys in the league right now.
Who else do they have, Howman? Who else do the Lions have?
They got Dan Campbell, baby.
Well, do they have a tight end you like?
Sam Laporta.
Yeah, they do have a tight end that's doing pretty good as a rookie, and a whole lot of people are saying, man, how did he last till the 2nd round? How did nobody think that – nobody had the foresight to think this guy was worthy of like a 1st round pick?
The only thing I would say back to that, Brandon, is you said it would be cool if the Lions won the Super Bowl, and it would, but it would become very annoying very quickly because every NFL team would chase building a Dan Campbell culture, and that would get exhausting on the internet. So the cynic in me is against it for that particular reason. But yeah, shout out to Jared Goff. Right now it's got to be like 2nd in MVP voting if MVP were today, behind Tua. We'll see. Danny, the idea that the Cowboys are an NFC contender, do you feel better or worse about that than you did this time last week?
I feel worse. I feel worse.
You feel worse than you did after the Niners loss, which is
correct. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, if you're asking like what the stock price is, I mean, we're between now and last week, I don't know if it's moved a whole lot. And I'll tell you why. I'm that I feel worse is because the problems that I saw last night are things that I think are not going to be corrected. And I think that this is not a way, like we're not going to be able to rely on Dak to do what he did last night to win games like that, because I think that's too, and honestly to the defense too, they made some plays. I mean, I don't know that you can this is a sustainable type of formula to win. And the schedule is brutal. And I was hoping that this Cowboys team that has been putting us on a roller coaster all year, it's either been, have felt really great or terrible. And this is one of those to where it's like, it's a close game. I was hoping that we would come out of it feeling really great. And then maybe we can look at this as we're only 6 weeks in. There's still a lot of work to do, a lot of football left. We still have time to get things together. Maybe we see some signs of the McCarthy offense doing some stuff. And then what happens? It like goes the other way and it's even worse. So no, I mean, I feel like last week I felt like we got eliminated from the playoffs. This week I felt like we're just going in like a free roll. Let's see what we could do. And then we go out there, we win the game, but I feel like it just was another reminder that we're not going to be able to we're not going this season is not going to be, we can't beat the top teams this year. So no, I feel worse. The Cowboys have done this to me. They have to show me that they're capable of playing good football, and they're just not. I mean, even in victory, there's just a lot of things that they have put on the field that just makes me concerned.
I agreed with you more and more as you went along, Danny. I would reframe it personally and say a week ago, I remain certain, but I was certain that the Cowboys could not beat the 49ers. So that just felt so devastating because unless somebody else takes care of them, the Cowboys are going to have to go through the 49ers. And so that puts a ceiling on their potential, obviously, as an NFC contender. But I think the collective hope was maybe they just suck against the Niners. Like maybe that's just their kryptonite. So when they're playing somebody else, they'll return to being superhuman or whatever the case may be. But I guess to your point, Monday night exemplified that some of the problems are their own, some of the significant problems, as opposed to the kryptonite in question, which is the 49ers. So interesting perspective there. Last one, Howman, we'll start with you. But again, the score before the final question, everybody. Danny, 65 points. Brandon, 60. Howman, 57. Play to win, boys. This is not Mike McCarthy at the end of the first half in Los Angeles. Better or worse? Overall thoughts on the Cowboys relative to last week. So not necessarily as a contender in the NFC Super Bowl contender, but just how you felt. I know this is kind of the same question. I said it that way, but there's a tile up for grabs. So impress us. Howman, you're up.
Yeah, overall I feel better just because I mean, after that 49ers loss, I felt really bad about this team. And I mean, how could you not? I don't think there's anybody that watched that game and was like, oh yeah, they're still got a good team. Like they was just hyped up so much as like, this is the one, like this is their chance to prove that, they can hang with a team like the 49ers. And like, even if they had gone in and they lost by like 3 or, if it was close, like it was in the last 2 playoff games, it would still suck to lose the game, but at least you could have said, oh, well, we fought, we were close in it. Like we had some good plays here. Like they just got obliterated, like offense, defense, special teams. It was all bad. And like there was not a single thing that went right in that game. And that was what made it so much like extra depressing, was the fact that not only did they like to get completely outclassed, but it was just so blatantly obvious that they could not compete with the best of the NFC. And then, with this game coming up and with, the hype of it being against Kellen Moore, the fact that it's their last game before the bye, that it's coming off that loss, I was kind of the mindset, like if they lose this game and they're losing 3 of their last 4, they go into the bye and they don't even have a chance to, just get right back out there and play another game. Like that could be something that fractures this locker room and they just have to sit on that feeling for a little bit. And I was like, that could be the worst case scenario because they're all going to be, off on their own for a week, having that feeling with them, and you don't know what you're going to get when they come back into the team facility and Mike McCarthy gets back in front of them. So I think it was absolutely crucial to get this win. Any sort of win, whether it was a blowout, whether it was a close win like we got. Obviously, there's still a lot to clean up. It was sloppy. The run game was really bad. The defense was, to borrow Danny's words, the defense was sus at some points, but they did step up and make some big plays at the end when they needed to. Special teams had a couple of uncharacteristically bad plays for them. So, like, it wasn't a game that made me say, yeah, like, we're back, like, Cowboys are a super team again. But it was like they avoided the worst possible scenario of how they could have responded from that game, and they came out and won. So I do feel better, but I still need to see a little bit more.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, to me, Howman, I mentioned the new Spider-Man games coming out this weekend. Like when you are playing a video game and you can't beat like a certain level and you're just like trying over and over and over and over again, and you get it done, but with like 2% life. And you're like, who cares? Like, I'll figure it out. Like I'll buy, refueling, whatever. Like I'll figure it out, but I'm at a new checkpoint. I'm at a new save point. Like this particular boss is behind me. Danny, with the sus usage, I know that you totally understood that analogy. Brandon, do you feel better or worse about the Cowboys relative to this time last week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how could you not? 42-10 last week. I think a lot of Cowboys Nation thought the sky was falling. I was not one of them. I said it on last week's show. I said that Obviously it was a terrible loss, but they played against the best team in the league with the 49ers. I know they just lost this past weekend, but I still stand pat that they are the best team in the league right now. So, that to me, I was like, all right, they're just not ready to play a team like the Niners. They're just not ready to put their big boy pants on and play against the top upper echelon teams in not only the conference but in the league. But when you're fourth in the conference, you're behind the big three. I think it's the big three we talked about, and then it's the Cowboys and everybody else. They're gonna make the team. They're gonna make the playoffs as a wild card team. I'm not too concerned about that. So I'm feeling good, about that from that perspective. But as I said on the writer's block this week, it was very sloppy and it wasn't the prettiest win. But a win is a win is a win. So I'm completely fine with obviously getting wins. I don't care. You're gonna have to win sloppy games, but again, their Achilles heel that still concerns me is the penalties, like these and these boneheaded mistakes that are going to come back to bite us in the end when it comes to the playoffs, because playoff teams and Super Bowl contenders, they don't make those boneheaded plays that the Cowboys seem to make. It didn't. It made. I felt like it made the Chargers game this past week a little bit closer than it should have been, to be frank. But the Cowboys still won. That's not going to happen every single week. Like if you're playing against the Niners, the Eagles, the Lions, when you play against teams like that, you need to pack your lunch and go and be on your game, because if you make these mistakes, they're going to make you pay for it. And the Niners made us pay for it 42-10 this past week. So this is a good win. There's still some work to do. There's still, like I said, there's still a 10 or 11 win team this year, which is going to get them in the playoffs. But I think I understand where their ceiling is. And to Danny's point earlier, I think we all know where the ceiling is. So, I'm okay with that right now. But I think there's going to be some changes if the Cowboys cannot make it to the NFC championship game this year. So there's going to be a lot of changes if that doesn't happen.
Danny, I like D-Day2's comment to set you up. Says they won a game that they didn't have a huge lead in. That was a good sign, at least. First time this season. Obviously, their other wins had been blowouts of the highest order. They'd been blown out in one. And even the Cardinals game, while they weren't blown out, they were kind of chasing things all day long. So this was kind of the first back and forth game they played. If you're really trying to spin some positive things, you do have that going for you. They did have a fourth quarter drive to take the lead, and then a fourth quarter drive where they held defensively. So you could take that and you could feel better, even if you don't feel better about them being an NFC contender.
Honestly, that's too much spinning, and I get dizzy by it, because I think that the thing about it is, yeah, you're right, it was a close game, and to what Howman was saying, he was saying some words that I actually agreed with, and we was talking about how if we would have lost this game, I think it could have fractured things, but just to think of that, how close the Cowboys actually were to that moment, I think it really tells you why we should be feeling a little bit unsettled right now. And I think that's why my thoughts, I do feel worse. And unlike Brandon too, is what he was saying is, yeah, it sounds like they have identified their ceiling, but I am not happy with this. This is a team that has the players and has the ability to actually do something, and I feel like they're squandering it. This is what's frustrating about it. You talk about, I don't think the defense was sus last night. I think there were moments where they made some bad plays, but let's be honest, they're trying to figure things out without LVE and Diggs, and like Bland's going to make some mistakes, and other guys, they're going to make some mistakes. But if you look at it, you can have a nice list of guys that just came up and made huge plays, and that defense came through for the Cowboys. That gives me hope. But on the other side of the ball, we have problems. And one thing I will say is that if they can figure some things out, and all is not lost because it's still early. If they can figure some things out, and we do have Dak Prescott, we do have CeeDee Lamb, we got some good players. Maybe our offensive line just needs to get a little healthier. I don't know. But if they can figure some things out, and just get this offense working, then suddenly we got a different conversation going on here, because I feel like the Cowboys have an opportunity, but they just have to go out there and play good football. I'm disappointed because I think that they didn't play all that great football. Defensively, pretty good. Offensively, left a lot to be desired, with the exception of Prescott, who just ran for his life and made plays. But to me, that's why I'm at where I'm at right now. But there's, like I said, it's still early.
Okay, very quickly here, and then we'll get to the winner. I think that's well said, Danny. The Cowboys are 4-2. I said on this week's episode of the NFC East Mixtape, which will come out on Wednesday, that Thanksgiving is kind of like the second checkpoint of the NFL season. Obviously, the Cowboys are at their first, given that it's their bye week. So the Cowboys are 4-2. Their 4 games before Thanksgiving are the Rams at home coming out of the bye. Then they travel to Philadelphia. They get the Giants at home, and then they are in Carolina the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Which if you have been around long enough, you know the Sunday before Thanksgiving can get a little bit weird for the Cowboys. But that being said, I just want a record prediction. They're 4-2 now. Howman, when we're sitting down, getting all tryptophaned up, what is the Cowboys' record?
7-3.
What's the loss?
Eagles.
Okay, Brandon.
I'm gonna go 8-2.
So you're saying they're sweeping them all, but you only have them as a 10 or 11 win team.
Yeah, they're gonna do some falling apart in December.
Okay. Okay. Danny Phantom.
I mean, I'm going to agree with Howman, but I tell you what, I'm a little more worried about that Rams game to worry. It wouldn't surprise me if they snuck in another loss there, but you look at that and they got to come through with 3 out of 4 here.
Okay, so we all think, because I'm with you, Howman, exactly 7-3 with the loss in Philly. I think they split with Philly this year. I'm fine giving each team the home win. That just makes logical sense. If they're 7-3 heading into Thanksgiving against the Commanders and a chance to get to 8-3, I mean, look, we'd all be pretty pleased, would we not? With 7-3 by Thanksgiving Day, right? We'd all be happy. Let's hope for that. Let's cross our fingers. Let's hope that the Tuesday Thanksgiving week roundtable has the Cowboys at least at 7-3. So, all right. Time to crown a winner. Is everybody ready? You guys don't sound ready at all. But anyway.
Ready.
We're ready. Yeah.
Thank you. Howman had the highest level of energy despite finishing last. Howman had 67 points tonight. Brandon, congratulations. Nice. 69 points. But our round table winner, Danny Phantom, working the crowd, working the sus. Danny, what do you have to say? I doubted your video game prowess. Maybe you want to dunk on me for that. Maybe you're a gamer and I don't even know that. Like, how are you feeling right now, Danny? I'm sure the emotions all over the place.
I'm not feeling any better, to be honest. But I will say this. I'm surprised because I knew I wasn't going to bring a lot of positive energy to this discussion. And but I feel like, you know what, we have to keep it real. The barometer on the Cowboys Nation right now, this is where we're at. And we just have to try to get our minds around what we're dealing with and try to fix the right problems. And I guess, maybe there's more people that agree with me than I realize. So, and for that, I feel good.
Brandon.
I was waiting for him to say yeet. That's what I was thinking. I heard sus. I was waiting for yeet when he gets declared winner. So, man,
Brandon, I wish you had won for that. That was really, really funny.
I'm gonna have to Google that one.
Make sure you're in incognito mode, Danny. Just to be safe. Wow. Howman, do you have anything to add to the vernacular, I guess, that we're learning here tonight?
I don't know. I've all been lingoed out already.
Okay, all right.
Actually, we'll go back and say it was real groovy.
Howman, I want you to close us out. It's a 2-part question. The first is, you saw Oppenheimer 8 times in theater. Is that correct?
Just 7.
Just 7, excuse me. So that Danny's eyebrows raised really high right there. Wow. So that being said, Howman, you're a very public Swiftie. Will you watch the Eras Tour movie more times in theater than you did Oppenheimer? And then we get out of here. Go.
I will see it. I will see it multiple times. I don't think I'm going to hit 7 times or more. But it will be multiple times because you can't turn down an opportunity like that.